Hey everybody, good to see you. Keith and Julie back for another discussion on the weekly Torah portion. This week, the Torah portion is going to be Vayikra, and otherwise known as Leviticus. Vayikra means "and he called," and actually, Vayikra, Leviticus is from what I remember, the first book that like young Jewish children, they are started with the book of Leviticus.
Wow, I
Mm,
didn't know that.
yeah.
That's pretty cool.
When we start out here, we're going to talk a little bit about the Hebrew language or the one particular Hebrew letter today. And when you look at, by the way, if you've got a King James version of the Bible, which you likely do in your house, if you turn to Psalm 119, that's going to be the longest chapter in the entire Bible. If you turn to Psalm 119, a lot of Bible versions, including like the King James, you will be able to see what the Hebrew letters look like, and you will see sort of a transliteration. So there's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and you'll see them all there. And by the way, the reason that stuck in my mind because that's one of the acrostic psalms. It's an alphanumerical pattern that we see there, and a lot of these things happen throughout the Bible like that. Um, there's a number of these in the Psalms, also the book of Proverbs, the well-known um, Proverbs chapter 31, starting verse 10 through 32, the virtuous woman. From starting to verse 10, every verse is going to begin with the corresponding Hebrew letter in order, the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Same sort of thing in Psalm 119, except that the entire first 8 verses are all going to start with the Aleph, the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet, and go all the way through to the end. So there's 176 verses broken down into 22 sections of 8 verses each. And so most of them, and I never even noticed this the entire time, used to that in the Bible that we actually have the Hebrew letters there visible in a lot of Bibles.
It's handy.
Hmm. There's also a number of what we refer to as textual anomalies that occur throughout the Scripture, and we talk about a lot of those. Right away, there's one here in the book of Leviticus or Vayikra, in that very word, which is the first word, and he called Vayikra, and so it's going to be spelled differently than we see like later on in the book of Numbers, chapter 23, verse 16, when God appears and speaks to Balaam, the false prophet, the soothsayer, the sorcerer, calls him a number of different names in the scripture. But when you look at Numbers 23:16, we see that this word Vayikra is spelled without the Aleph, without the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, unlike the way we see it here in Leviticus 1:1, that it says Vayikra and it has the Aleph. But what you'll see if you look at this in the Hebrew, in that first word, the Aleph is not an ordinary Aleph. The Aleph is a drastically reduced Aleph, much smaller than a normal Aleph would be. And so there's different commentaries, Jewish commentaries on this and why this is the case. And basically, what a lot of the scholars, the sages, say about that is that Moses, when he was penning the Torah, when God was dictating it to him, that when they got to Vayikra and he called, that Moses did not put an Aleph, that he basically wrote it just like the same word that is going to be used in Numbers 23 that I mentioned, that the way God spoke to Balaam. And in that passage, what it says, usually in the English, something like, and Hashem happened upon Balaam, and he happened upon him. Sort of just, it's a much more less personal, less intimate, less respectful.
Deliberately intentional.
Yes, way to say it, as opposed to the way he's speaking to Moses in Leviticus 1:1, and he called Vayikra with the Aleph. And so, as the story goes, Moses is writing Vayikra there, only he did not put an Aleph. And God told him, go ahead and put an Aleph. And so Moses was so humble, and he didn't feel worthy to merit the honor of God calling to him, of the importance and the compliment and the honor of all that. So he put a little bitty Aleph instead of the normal sized Aleph, is kind of sort of the way the commentaries go on that.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, since the scriptures referred to him as the most humble man.
Yes, they do, and that's really a lot of what this Aleph signifies. And this, once again, is one of the many things that in the Scripture that you're just not going to see in an English or Japanese or whatever translation of the Bible. There's a lot of these insightful things that are there that you're just not going to see in English. Well, I'm reminded of Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 17, the well-known passage when Yeshua said, "Think not that I have come to destroy the law, the Torah, or the prophets. I have not come to destroy but fulfill. Verily I say unto you, not the smallest jot or tittle shall in no wise pass away from the Torah until heaven and earth pass away and all these things be fulfilled." And it goes on there, but he said, the Messiah himself said that not the smallest jot or tittle will pass away from the law until heaven and earth pass away and all is fulfilled. The jots and tittles, the jot is the smallest letter in the Hebrew language, that we know it as the yud or yod, depending on how you pronounce it. It's going to be the 10th letter, and that's actually the letter that Yeshua begins with, the yud or yod. And so that's translated as jot in Matthew. In the book of Luke, a little bit of variation in the way that Luke, in the way that Luke tells the story. He says that, in quoting Yeshua, he said, "It's easier for heaven and earth to pass away than from one tittle of the Torah to fail." Which is pretty
amazing.
That's a pretty profound statement.
Yeah.
That it's easier for all of this, for heaven and earth to pass away. And last time I looked outside, it was still there. So we know that not the smallest tittle has failed or been passed away from the Torah. That's how you know if the Torah or anything in it has been nullified or done away with. If you can go outside and still see the heaven and earth, then it's still there.
Easy.
But the tittles are little decorations, like on the letters, which are also many times referred to as thorns and crowns.
That's interesting.
Yeah, you've got the kots, which is the thorns, or the tagin, which is a little crowns on there. And so, which is interesting, when we talk about who is the word, or the Aleph Tav, and the thorns and the crowns on the tops of the heads of the letters and all of this. And but in addition to those kinds of things, we have a lot of these textual anomalies pretty often that we talk about, like this one. There's another one related to the Aleph that we see in the book of 1 Chronicles chapter 1, verse 1. And it's given us the genealogies, and it begins, of course, with Adam or Adam. And so what we see there with Adam, now we see the Aleph that begins Adam's name, the Aleph, the Dalet, and the Mem. But now, instead of a reduced or a minuscule Aleph, we have an enlarged Aleph, way bigger than a normal size letter. And so, looking at Leviticus here, and we're seeing when God spoke to Moses, we've got a little bitty letter, little bitty Aleph, And then in First Chronicles, when we're looking at Adam in the genealogy, it starts out with an enlarged one. So naturally we would, as the rabbis have done, compare and contrast and notice the differences between the reduced or microscopic Aleph compared to the enlarged, one to do with Adam.
Well, I mean, we've said this before. God doesn't do things for no reason. I mean, if he really is the author of the scriptures and they're inspired, then no part of it is superfluous. It's there for a reason. And what is the scripture you're quoting a lot? It is the purpose of God or
It's
something.
the glory of God to
hide
conceal
a thing. And it's the glory of kings to search out a thing.
Right.
And so, I've heard a lot of Christians say things like, you just need to trust God and not be questioning so much or whatever, some variation of that. And to me, it's backwards. Because you believe in his word, because you understand his nature, that he doesn't do things in vain and for no reason, and because you understand he's leaving you breadcrumbs, then to pull those threads and to start asking the questions, it's not that you're trying to prove the validity of God. You're trying to ask why he did something a certain way. It's almost like a treasure hunt in the scriptures.
Yeah, well, I'm reminded of the verse that Yeshua said that, I'll try to paraphrase it here, but a scribe trained in the things of the kingdom is like a man who brings out of his house treasures old and new. And you'll have to look it up because I know I didn't get that just perfectly there. But when we look at the contrast of the olives, of the little olive and the big olive, as I said, Moses, and Julie mentioned it, and the scripture itself says that Moses was the most humble of men. Now, we don't get certain things, again, on the surface level in the text. There's a lot of these things, as I said, that you're not going to get in the English, or you're not even going to get on a surface level understanding of certain things. And so, but in the Hebrew, if you begin to look at these things and take them seriously, if you believe, as the New Testament says, the Tanakh, the Old Testament and the New Testament, in the New Testament, Paul says that all Scripture is inspired, is God-breathed, and it's profitable for correction, for reproof, for instruction in righteousness. That all of it is, and it's all God-breathed. And Yeshua, when contending with the devil, with Hasatan, he said that, what does it say? That, I'm trying to, my mind went blank a little bit.
Don't you
Man
hate it
shall
when
not
happens?
live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. That man's supposed to live by every word. And so at the time, there's no New Testament. So he's talking about the Tanakh, or the Hebrew scriptures. And so we've got this contrast. The rabbis say that Adam became a little bit uppity, was overconfident, had a little bit of arrogance, and in contrast to Moses. And so that he exalted himself and fell. And there's a lot of these little idioms that the higher, not just the higher the fewer,
I was saying that, the higher the fewer.
Which Julie says that a lot, and that's not verbatim from the scripture, although there's I think that concept is there. I think that this is from Star Trek instead.
Yeah, the Next Generation, the higher the fewer. Yeah.
But a rabbinic idiom says something like, the higher the brick, the further it falls. Like a brick on a wall, the bricks that are the highest, if the wall falls over, they fall further than the bricks that are closest to the ground. And so when Adam, who was high up, fell, he fell further. And so we see this contrast in a lot of these. To me, this is spiritual physics or spiritual economics. And there's a lot of things that are not rational. They don't make sense to the natural or carnal mind, but it is the way God's economic system or his physics work and how they operate. And so man's system a lot of times, and the carnal, worldly, natural, material thinking is that by making yourself big and exalting yourself that you become something. Whereas the way the scriptures, God's economy works is that, well, by decreasing, by becoming small, like humbling yourself, you become great. By contracting, you expand. By decreasing, you increase. By humbling yourself, you become exalted. By becoming least, you become the greatest. And so there's a number of these verses that you might have in mind that deal with this whole concept here.
Well, I really don't have a bunch of verses in my mind. I should, but I was just thinking about Adam, in the Adamic thing of whatever caused the Aleph to be large when referring to Adam. You know, since the fall, I mean, there's just that human nature, sin. There's a phrase I can't think of, just the sin nature that is ever present in us, and Paul even referred to it. You know, once you get far enough in the spiritual process, it's no longer I that sins, but sin in me. And this was after Yeshua, after being reborn, after the baptism of the Holy Spirit, after practicing it a while. He still said, it's sin in me. And so there's just this concept of, and this practice that you have to do along the journey of getting closer to God and being more like God to manifest the kingdom of God, of taking that thing that seems natural to us. I mean, any given number of examples, you know, like you're driving along, I mean, just an obvious one, you're driving along on the highway. Someone cuts you off or does something that they shouldn't do. I mean, in all honesty, they shouldn't do, and maybe they're rude about it, and you just, you know, want to grab the wheel and get all, you know, and you want to gas it and get right up beside them and kind of give them what for or whatever on the road and cut them off. Is that natural? Sure. It's absolutely natural. But in order to become like God, we've got to become like God.
Supernatural.
Well, we do. And I mean, it takes reining that in. And I think so many times people are waiting for something from heaven, a rushing mighty wind from heaven to come down and just corral them like a magical lasso. Was it Wonder Woman that used to have the magical lasso? And come down kind of like that and just lasso our sin nature or our fallen Adamic nature in for us. And I mean, even if people have had an experience where the Holy Spirit has come in and really done a miraculous work in a certain place of our lives, he doesn't come in and do a total work in every area. I mean, there's always going to be areas that we're going to have to do this in. And I think a lot of people just look at that and say, oh my gosh, that's too much work. Like, you're just going to have to do this all the time. Like, I'm
That's
just
why
going to.
Yeshua said to count the cost.
Well, but.
And there is a cost.
There is a cost, but there's to the degree that there's a cost, there's a payoff.
Yes.
I mean, this isn't like investments nowadays or whatever where you don't know, but this is something that you can actually bank on completely, that to the degree that you limit that fallen Adamic nature for the purpose of enlarging the space in you for the kingdom of God, it will happen. You do. You have to decrease the Adamic nature that's natural to us that says, well, they don't have any right to do this. Well, they don't. And there's, you know, the prophets confronted evil and wrongdoing, but they didn't do it from the place that we often do of personal offense in our identity. They were representing the God of Israel. And so just decreasing to increase is a common universal spiritual law of becoming more like God. I mean, because you can talk about going to heaven in the vernacular of Christianity and forgiveness of sin, and you can talk about that until the day you die, and it can be true in so much as it is true, but you've got to find a way to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, where you take those gifts of God and you make them count.
Yeah. Well, I'm reminded also of, another famous verse, Yeshua said, it's more easy for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom. And so when you sort of break that apart and you think about that, now the word camel is the word gemal that begins with the gimel. And part of that letter, all the letters have lots of different meanings and connotations, but one of the meanings of the letter gimel is to lift up, and it can be lifted up as in pride. And so there is this idea of it's more difficult for this large camel or gamal. Some people think that it should be translated as a rope. And there's who knows? Some people think that it should be translated that it's harder to put a rope through the eye of the needle than for a camel. And as far as I can ascertain or validate, I haven't found any historical evidence of the city gate being called the eye of the needle or anything. So if I had heard that, and that makes for a really neat story.
It does.
But I just can't validate that anywhere. But just taking it on its face, what we have here, it's more easy for a camel to go through the eye of the needle. So for a really large animal to contract himself down to go through this very small portal than for a wealthy person. And the idea of wealth and riches many times is weight, or like it talks about Abraham being weighted down with wealth,
abundance,
which is,
blessing.
Yeah. So it's this it's expansion thing. So it's more difficult for a person that's very expanded in this world, in materially, to contract himself to make it through the portal of the kingdom.
Yep.
It's more easy for a large animal to contract itself to go through the eye of a needle than for a wealthy person to contract themselves enough to make it through the portal of the kingdom.
Well, they're two different kingdoms. I mean, your value systems are completely different, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with having abundance. I mean, God did bless Abraham. I think some people can handle both. I don't know that I've met too many people that I think could handle both at an extreme, like whether you had extreme wealth and then trying to be extremely close to God. I don't know that I've ever seen that myself. I'm just trying to rack my brain. So, I mean, again, I'm not saying that having money is bad, but it's more about value systems and values and what you practice. I mean, even in my own case, like I've had times in my life where things were thin, and then I've had times in my life where things were abundant. And when they're abundant, it's nice, you don't have to worry about every little bill or everything that comes down the pike because you've got the means to do things. But, I lost my train of thought. Give me a second. But, so you don't want to have to worry, but at the same time, I mean, I guess for me it kind of came down to whether I have little or a lot, can I walk away from it in my values? I mean, it's almost a little bit like I see God telling Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. He didn't actually make him sacrifice Isaac. He just tested, well, I mean, I know, you can get, that's a whole video series or whatever, all the symbolism and all of that, but he wanted to see if he could do it and if he would choose to obey him. And just in my own life, if God came along and said something horrifically off the wall, like he did to different people, like to Abraham. I mean, you talk about abundance and being able to pursue God, but then when God said, get up and leave your country and your family and turn your back on anything you've ever known, turn your back on the family business, according to, is it Jasher? Or, yeah, it talks a little bit more about that in the book of Jasher, that apparently it was pretty lucrative. Turn your back on security. I mean, as sinful of place as maybe this pagan city was, turn your back on the known, turn your back on systems, turn your back on what seems reasonable to men to make their way in the world, and go out into a wilderness, go out into the desert, into a land that I'll show you. And he did. I mean, and I think that's, to me, whenever God asked him to do something that was weird and off the wall and crazy, he obeyed. That's why riches weren't a problem for him, because he knew who his God was, and if God said go give it all away, he would do it. I mean, if he's going to give his son that was promised, that was precious to him, the most precious thing he had, he'd give his wealth in a New York minute. It's all about values.
Well, and he was a person who was humble and knew how to contract himself, to limit himself. And I'm reminded of some other verses. John the Baptist, that toward the end of his ministry, he said, I must decrease so that he, that is the Messiah Yeshua, might increase. And so he understood his role, and he had that ability. So another way to say it, I must contract so that he can expand. And this was often a point of contention among the disciples that we read about at times, of who is going to be the greatest in the kingdom, in this sort of thing. And so
arguing about it.
Yeah. And so Yeshua, again, the difference between worldly or material or carnal economics and the way those systems might making right and that sort of thing, the way the world and the people of the world and its systems often work, of whoever can, step on somebody else to get to the top, then that's the way it works. But when we're talking about the physics and principles of the kingdom and its economics, he said, he that would be greatest, let him be the least. So basically that's how that works, is the one who makes their olive small and really contracts themselves is the one whose the olive ultimately expands. And so that's what basically what we see, because Moses, it says, was the humblest of men, but the rabbis say that he was the greatest of the prophets, and that there's just Moshe Rabbeinu, that he became great through his great humility. And if you remember the story, he lacked self-confidence even at times, but he did, and so he didn't feel worthy or qualified for this great mission that God had for him, but he ultimately did settle into it and knew that there's no reason, and there's no honor and there's no virtue in, if God has put something in you, if he's given you an ability, a talent, or a calling, to say, oh, I'm not worthy, therefore I won't do it. You're not going to get any points with him or really anybody for doing that.
It's burying your talent.
Yeah, it essentially is, in the guise or in the cloak of religiosity, but it's not going to.
It's not going to stand.
No.
Well, and it may be a legitimate and real feeling. We've done videos off and on over the years, you more than me, and so there's always kind of this sense that, it's a little bit horrifying. When you see yourself on tape, nobody likes seeing that and experiencing that, but ultimately, you have to be willing to show up to do whatever it is that you think you need to do, and to be a servant to God.
That's right.
What else is there?
Well, I hope that the conversation has been interesting to you folks today, and look forward to getting back to you again real soon. Shabbat Shalom.
See ya.
Hey, if you like this video, please click like and subscribe to be notified whenever we release new content, and to help other people find us out there on the vast plains of YouTube land. If you have a question or a topic you'd like for us to do a video about, just leave it in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Later, y'all.